MS Now international reporter Inez de la Catera, who is at the G7 this morning, joins us. Okay, help us out. What should we expect the president's message to be at this summit? Normally, he does not love these group events. He does not like being shoulder to shoulder, being peers. He views himself as the dominant world leader. What are we going to expect?
Hey, Stephanie. Yeah, so the presser keeps getting delayed. So it was supposed to be at 3 p.m. local. We're now expecting it to be closer to 5 p.m. local. But we are expecting President Trump at that presser to continue defending his deal with Iran as he has throughout this G7. That's really been the focus of this G7, has been this deal with Iran, because, of course, there's still so much we don't know about it. There are lots of questions as to, this issue of transparency. President Trump was asked yesterday why he hasn't released the full text. He says he will. He's waiting for the formal signing ceremony on Friday in Switzerland. We understand J.D. Vance is going to be attending that ceremony. But you can bet that world leaders here have been drilling down on those details with President Trump in their one-on-one meetings. So we know just yesterday, President Trump met with the leaders of Qatar and the UAE. Those countries are countries that have been really on the front lines of this war. They have been repeatedly bombed by Iran, their critical energy infrastructure wrecked. It's estimated that it's going to take billions to repair that infrastructure. So that's probably something that came up in that meeting. Of course, we don't know for sure because those meetings were held behind closed doors. But yeah, world leaders and reporters alike have been asking the president lots of questions about this deal. Still lots of questions as to the nuclear issue. President Trump has been saying that this is a deal that's going to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, that it's better than the JCPOA. Of course, we won't know that again until we see this final text.
Well, when that presser begins, we will definitely head there. Inez, thank you. Now let's get smarter with the help of our leadoff panel this morning. My dear friend and colleague David Rohde is back, MS Now senior national security reporter, and Richard Haass, president emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations and senior counselor for Centerview Partners. He is also the author of the weekly Substack newsletter, Home and Away. All right, David, let's take a deep breath. I mean, there is so much happening. What do you see as the upshot for these G7 meetings for President Trump? I mean, when I say he has gone out of his way to attack the majority of these leaders, that's an understatement.
He's gone out of his way to attack all these leaders, and he just announced he's going to restart possibly the war that has caused this global energy crisis, which is a huge problem for Europe.
Where he said right there, if they don't do this on Friday, I'm going to be dropping bombs right on their heads.
Exactly.
Yes.
Here we go again.
Direct quote. Almost direct quote.
And it's the same approach of sort of bullying and all this stuff. And bluntly, it hasn't worked with the Iranians. We can talk about the draft agreement and what we've heard so far. And it hasn't worked with the Europeans either. The Europeans have actually stepped up on Ukraine. They pushed through a nearly $900 billion loan to Ukraine that has helped Ukraine turn the tide on this war. I mean, remember Trump saying to Zelensky, you don't have the cards. Zelensky has the cards now, and that loan went through because his authoritarian ally in Hungary, Viktor Orban, lost. He was blocking this loan. All of this is to say Trump is losing in Iran. I think European leaders are playing nice, but less afraid of him now than they were in the past. And he's wrong about Ukraine. He's just dead wrong about what was going to happen in that war.
Richard, on Iran, how do we even begin to evaluate a deal when we have no idea what's in it?
Well, I think we have some idea what's in it. I think directionally it's pretty clear. And we can caveat everything we say depending upon the final details. And indeed, we can't even be 100% sure there's going to be a deal. You've got, shall we say, multiple things going on, from Donald Trump now threatening to resume force. Who knows what Iran might do? And then you got the Israelis and their goals, in particular in Lebanon. But directionally, I think it's pretty clear, Stephanie. We're talking about significant economic help for Iran, full extent to be determined. Most of the nuclear issues will be deferred to be negotiated. The most significant thing might be that the status quo, while those negotiations are going on, Iran has pledged to maintain that. The Strait will be reopened probably over the next 30 to 60 days. Big question whether it stays open after that and under what terms. Other issues like Iran's conventional forces, its drones, its missiles seem not to be included in any agreement. So a lot of the Israeli concerns, I would think, won't be met. And all this money going to the regime, I think, is bad news for the people of Iran. That essentially one of the pledges in the draft agreement is neither side will get involved in the internal affairs of the other country. That's a pretty big drop-off 4 months ago, we were talking about regime change. Now we're talking about hands off and helping these guys economically.
Okay, so if a huge payment is bad news for the Iranian people, I'm not sure how it's good news for the American people. Again, we do not know the details, but explain to us what we do know about this potential large payment to Iran, because I'm old enough to remember what President Trump has been saying over and over and over about the JCPOA and money that went to Iran last time around.
So we have a sense, Richard's right, none of this is final, but our colleague Inzamam Rashid got a draft of one draft of the MOU. There's versions floating around on the internet. Bloomberg published a version. It definitely says, and senior administration officials have said this, it's all geared towards this final agreement, the next 2 rounds, and the 60 days of negotiations. There's virtually nothing that in these current drafts. All it talks about is reopening the strait in both directions. So it's vague. There's very little achieved. And yes, there will be a total, if there's a final agreement, a lifting of all U.S. sanctions on Iran that prevented companies from doing business there. All UN sanctions would end, and up to $300 billion in investment. And senior administration officials on a call with reporters, they said Iranian, leaders, this regime has a choice. Do they want to be like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, some of the richest countries in the world, and be part of the global economy and community? These are committed revolutionaries who killed thousands, maybe tens of thousands of protesters. They don't want to be like Saudi Arabia. So they're going to get $300 billion, and they're going to use that money to rebuild their missile stockpile. We'll see what happens on the nuclear issues, and they're going to use that money to fund their proxies. The missiles and the proxies aren't even mentioned in the drafts of the MOU that are floating around.
Then, Richard, how is that a win for us, A, and B, when we look at that memo that the White House had been sending out, they sent out a memo to their own allies of here's how you should talk about the agreement. That memo, what was in it, was completely disconnected from reality.
Look, Stephanie, let's just be blunt here. You can try to spin it as a victory for the United States, but that's spin. We're not coming off stronger. Real questions about our competence. Real questions about the security of our partners in that part of the world, the Arab ones, as well as Israel, and so forth. So, again, the administration will try. The reopening of the strait is nothing more than a return to the status quo ante. And as I said a few minutes ago, we'll see if it lasts. Iran has become a far more radical government, and the money. Also, the agreement talks about immediate economic help, not just this $300 billion fund David was alluding to, but also the release of frozen assets, easing of sanctions. So there will be some economic gains going to the Iranian government right away. So quite honestly, we can try to shape it as a victory. But Iran has demonstrated its willingness and ability to attack its neighbors and seize control of the Strait of Hormuz. That's an enormous strategic gain for Iran. Plus, this regime is still in power and is likely to be for some time to come, not only because of what it's done, but also because of the economic help going its way.
Well, let's talk about how they did it or the impression it's left. New York Times opinion writer Bret Stephens is calling the entire situation with Iran a debacle. He wrote the following: Tehran took the measure of Trump's courage. What it found was a bone spur. This is Bret Stephens, okay, a conservative writer who supported the war when it started. What does that tell you? When we come out of this, who's going to be standing shoulder to shoulder with Trump, saying, right on, this was great, with the exception of tech leaders who have made so much money, they're not even living on planet Earth?
No country, and particularly no country in the Middle East, and particularly Israel. There's concerns that Bibi Netanyahu is going to try to blow up this deal because it's so bad for Israel in the long term. It is. And I'll just keep it short. I agree with what Bret Stephens said. President Trump launched a war of choice. The really big issue was ground troops. And if he really wanted to win this war, he would need to take Karg Island or actually, I think, land some troops in Iran. I'm not saying we should invade Iran with our ground troops. But when you go to war, you must fight totally and completely and show personal courage. And he blinked. President Trump kept dropping bombs, and it didn't work. And bombs aren't enough to win a war.
Taco, the war edition. David Rohde, Richard Haass, thank you so much for joining us. Richard, I haven't seen you in a while. It is great to have you back.